What happens when one of Hollywood's most respected actors walks into what should be a routine morning talk show interview, only to find himself in the crosshairs of a host determined to make headlines at any cost? What you're about to witness is the explosive moment that had Matt Damon storming off the View set, leaving Joy Behar scrambling to explain herself to a stunned studio audience. This isn't just another celebrity interview gone wrong. This is a masterclass in how personal agendas can destroy professional credibility in a matter of minutes. Make sure to hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below, because you're going to want to discuss this one. Matt Damon had agreed to appear on The View to promote his latest environmental documentary, a passion project that had taken him 3 years to complete. As he settled into the familiar curved desk setup, adjusting his microphone with the practiced ease of someone who had done hundreds of these appearances, he expected the usual mix of softball questions about his family, upcoming projects, and maybe some light political banter. The other hosts, Whoopi Goldberg, Sarah Haynes, and Alyssa Farenthold, offered warm smiles and seemed genuinely interested in hearing about his work. Joy Behar, however, had a different energy entirely. From the moment the cameras started rolling, her demeanor was sharp, almost predatory. She barely waited for the standard introductions to finish before launching into her first attack. "So, Matt," Joy said, her voice dripping with false sweetness, "here you are talking about saving the environment while you own multiple massive homes that probably have carbon footprints bigger than entire neighborhoods. Don't you think that makes you a bit of a hypocrite?" The question caught Matt off guard, not because he hadn't faced criticism about celebrity environmentalism before, but because of how aggressively Joy had phrased it. The other hosts shifted uncomfortably in their seats, clearly not expecting this kind of confrontational opening. "Well, Joy," Matt replied, maintaining his composure, "I think that's actually a fair question that a lot of people have. The reality is that I've made significant investments in renewable energy for all my properties, and the documentary we're discussing today actually addresses exactly that kind of criticism. We can't let perfect be the enemy of good when it comes to environmental action." Joy wasn't satisfied with his measured response. She leaned forward, her eyes narrowing as she prepared her next verbal assault. "That sounds like a lot of Hollywood spin to me," she shot back. "You fly around the world on private jets, preaching about carbon emissions, while the rest of us are told to ride bicycles and eat less meat. How do you sleep at night knowing you're telling people to sacrifice while you live like a king?" Whoopi tried to interject, sensing the interview was already going off the rails. "Joy, maybe we should let Matt actually talk about the documentary itself," she suggested diplomatically. But Joy was just getting started. She waved Whoopi off with a dismissive gesture that made it clear she had no intention of backing down. "No, I think this is exactly what we should be talking about," Joy continued, her voice rising with righteous indignation. "I'm tired of celebrities coming on shows like this and lecturing regular people about how to live while they exempt themselves from the same standards. Matt, you made over $20 million last year alone. How many solar panels could that money have bought for low-income families instead of funding another vanity project?" Matt's jaw tightened slightly, but he kept his voice steady and professional. "Joy, I understand your frustration, and I think a lot of people share those concerns. But what you're doing right now is exactly the kind of divisive rhetoric that prevents us from having productive conversations about these issues. The documentary features families from all economic backgrounds who are making real changes in their communities." "Divisive rhetoric?" Joy's voice hit a higher pitch, and she laughed bitterly. "That's rich coming from someone who supported political candidates who've blocked environmental legislation for years. You can't have it both ways, Matt. You can't claim to care about the planet while supporting politicians who take money from oil companies." Sarah Haynes looked visibly uncomfortable and tried to steer the conversation back on track. "Maybe we could talk about some of the specific solutions highlighted in the documentary," she suggested hopefully. Joy shot her a look that could have frozen fire. "Sarah, I think our viewers deserve honesty, not some carefully crafted PR message. Matt, yes or no, do you think your lifestyle choices align with the environmental message you're promoting?" Matt took a deep breath, clearly working to maintain his professional demeanor despite Joy's increasingly hostile questioning. Joy, I think you're trying to reduce a complex global issue to a simple gotcha moment. And that's not helpful for anyone. Yes, I live a privileged life, and yes, I try to use that privilege responsibly. The documentary shows ordinary people making extraordinary changes, and that's what I want to focus on. There it is, Joy said triumphantly, pointing her finger at him like a prosecutor who had just caught a defendant in a lie. You admit you live a privileged life, but you won't admit that privilege comes with responsibility. You won't admit that maybe, just maybe, you should be doing more than making documentaries that make you feel good about yourself. The studio audience was growing restless, with some scattered murmurs of disapproval rippling through the seats. Alyssa Farenthold tried to jump in with a question about the film's production, but Joy cut her off before she could finish her sentence. I'm not done here, Joy declared, her voice now carrying an edge of genuine anger. Matt, I want you to look into that camera and tell our viewers why they should listen to environmental advice from someone who probably burns more fossil fuels in a month than they do in a year. Matt's composure finally began to crack. His eyes flashed with irritation as he turned to face Joy directly. You know what, Joy? I came here in good faith to talk about important work that highlights real solutions to climate change. But instead of having a meaningful conversation, you've decided to turn this into some kind of personal attack. That's not journalism, that's just performance. Joy's eyes lit up at his response, as if she had been waiting for exactly this moment. Performance? That's interesting coming from an actor. Tell me, Matt, is your environmental activism just another role you're playing for the cameras? The question hung in the air like a toxic cloud, and Matt's expression shifted from annoyed to genuinely angry. The other hosts looked mortified, with Whoopi actually covering her face with her hands for a brief moment. That's completely out of line, Joy, Matt said, his voice now carrying a steel edge that hadn't been there before. You're questioning my sincerity about issues I've been working on for over 15 years, long before it was fashionable in Hollywood. That's not just unprofessional. It's insulting. Joy, however, seemed energized by his anger, rather than chastened by it. She leaned back in her chair with a satisfied smirk, clearly pleased that she had finally gotten under his skin. Insulting? Matt, what's insulting is watching wealthy celebrities lecture working families about their carbon footprints, while living in mansions that could house 50 people. What's insulting is this entire charade where you pretend to care about the planet while your bank account grows fatter from investments in the very industries destroying it. That's enough, Whoopi finally said firmly, trying to regain control of her show. Joy, this interview was supposed to be about Matt's documentary work, not some personal vendetta. Joy turned on Whoopi with surprising venom. Personal vendetta? Whoopi, since when is holding public figures accountable for their hypocrisy a personal vendetta? This is exactly the kind of softball journalism that lets these people get away with saying whatever they want without consequences. Matt stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor with a harsh sound that echoed through the suddenly silent studio. You know what, Joy? You want to talk about consequences? Let's talk about the consequences of the kind of cynical, destructive rhetoric you're peddling right now. Oh, please. Joy scoffed, rolling her eyes dramatically. Save the righteous indignation for your next movie role. You're not a victim here. Matt, you're a privileged white man who doesn't like being called out for his inconsistencies. The racial commentary seemed to hit Matt like a physical blow. His face reddened, and for a moment, the entire studio held its breath, waiting to see how he would respond to such a deliberate provocation. Are you serious right now? Matt asked, his voice barely controlled. You're going to make this about race? You're going to sit there and reduce a conversation about environmental policy to some kind of identity politics gotcha moment? Joy's smile widened, sensing she had found another pressure point. I'm just pointing out the obvious, Matt. When people who look like you and have the resources you have start getting criticized, suddenly it's unfair and inappropriate. But when regular people face consequences for their choices, that's just the way the world works. Sarah Haynes looked like she wanted to disappear into her chair, while Alyssa Farenthold was frantically signaling to producers off camera. The studio audience was growing more restless, with some people actually getting up to leave. "You're incredible," Matt said, shaking his head in disbelief. "You're actually trying to twist this into something it's not because you can't defend your own behavior. You invited me here under false pretenses, Joy. You had no intention of discussing the documentary or the environmental issues it raises. You just wanted to create a spectacle." Joy's mask of righteous indignation slipped slightly, revealing something much uglier underneath. "False pretenses? Matt, the only false thing here is your entire public persona. You want to be seen as this thoughtful, socially conscious actor. But when someone asks you tough questions, you fall apart like a house of cards." "Tough questions?" Matt's voice rose for the first time since the interview began. "Joy, you haven't asked a single substantive question about environmental policy, climate science, or practical solutions. All you've done is launch personal attacks and try to score political points." The word bullying seemed to strike a nerve with Joy. Her face flushed red, and her voice became shrill and defensive. "Bullying? Did you just call me a bully? Matt, I've been doing this job longer than you've been making movies that matter. I've interviewed presidents, world leaders, and Nobel Prize winners." "Then maybe you should start acting like it," Matt shot back, his patience finally exhausted. "Because right now, you're acting like a shock jock who's more interested in viral moments than actual conversation." Whoopi made another attempt to restore order. "Okay. Everyone needs to take a breath here. We're getting way off track." But Joy was beyond reason now, her professional facade completely abandoned. "No, Whoopi. I want to hear Matt explain how asking legitimate questions about his credibility constitutes bullying. I want to hear him explain why he thinks he should be immune from criticism just because he's famous." Matt turned to face the cameras directly, speaking to the viewing audience rather than continuing to engage with Joy's provocations. "I came here today to talk about a documentary that features real families making real changes in their communities. Instead, I've been subjected to a series of personal attacks that have nothing to do with environmental issues and everything to do with creating controversy for ratings." Joy wasn't about to let him have the last word. "There he goes again, playing the victim. Matt, you're sitting on a platform that reaches millions of people, using it to promote your personal projects while claiming moral superiority. If you can't handle being questioned about that, maybe you shouldn't be here." "You're absolutely right," Matt said, his voice suddenly calm and deadly serious. "Maybe I shouldn't be here. In fact, I know I shouldn't be here." He reached for his microphone pack, beginning to remove it as the other hosts watched in horror. The studio audience was now completely silent, sensing they were witnessing something unprecedented. "Matt, please," Sarah Haynes pleaded. "Don't let this end like this." But Joy couldn't help herself. Even as Matt was clearly preparing to leave, she had to get in one more shot. "That's right, Matt. Run away when the questions get too hard. Very environmental of you to waste everyone's time." That final insult was the breaking point. Matt stopped removing his microphone and turned back to face Joy, with an expression that could have melted steel. The studio fell into an eerie silence, as everyone realized they were about to witness something that would be talked about for years. "You know what, Joy?" Matt said, his voice quiet but filled with barely contained fury. "You want to talk about wasting time? Let's talk about how you've spent the last 15 minutes trying to tear down someone who's actually trying to make a difference, instead of discussing solutions that could help people. Let's talk about how you've turned what should have been an educational conversation into a personal destruction campaign." Joy, incredibly, seemed to take this as encouragement to continue her assault. "Oh, spare me the sanctimonious lecture, Matt. You're not some environmental savior. You're a celebrity who found a cause that makes him feel important. And you're a talk show host who's forgotten that your job is supposed to be about informing people, not attacking them. Matt fired back. Do you know what I was going to talk about today, Joy? I was going to talk about a family in Ohio who cut their energy consumption by 70% using techniques they learned from community organizers. I was going to talk about a teacher in Detroit who started a school garden program that's feeding hundreds of kids while teaching them about sustainable agriculture. Joy rolled her eyes dismissively. More Hollywood feel-good stories. That's exactly my point, Matt. You cherry-pick these heartwarming examples while ignoring the bigger picture. The bigger picture? Matt's voice rose again. Joy, you haven't asked me a single question about policy, about science, about practical applications of renewable energy, about anything that would actually inform your viewers. All you've done is attack my character because you think it makes for good television. Whoopi made one last desperate attempt to save the interview. Matt, maybe we could reset here and talk about the actual content of the documentary. But Joy wasn't finished. Whoopi, stop trying to protect him. Matt, if you really cared about these issues, you'd be using your platform to push for real systemic change instead of making vanity documentaries that make you look good at film festivals. Matt laughed, but there was no humor in it. Systemic change? Joy, do you know what systemic change looks like? It looks like the renewable energy legislation I've been lobbying for in Washington for the past 3 years. It looks like the microgrant program I helped establish that's funded over 200 community sustainability projects. But you didn't bother to research any of that before bringing me on your show, did you? For the first time since the interview began, Joy looked slightly uncertain. But instead of backing down, she doubled down on her attacks. Anyone can throw money at problems, Matt. That doesn't make you an expert on environmental policy. And anyone can ask gotcha questions and create controversy. Matt shot back. That doesn't make you a journalist. Joy, you've had 30 minutes of access to someone who's spent years working on these issues, and instead of using that time to educate your audience, you've used it to grandstand and attack. That's not just unprofessional, it's irresponsible. Joy's face was now bright red, and her voice became increasingly shrill. Don't you dare lecture me about responsibility. You hypocritical movie star. You live in a bubble of privilege and wealth, and you have the audacity to come on my show and act like you're some kind of environmental hero. Your show? Matt asked incredulously. Joy, this isn't your show. This is The View, and unless I'm mistaken, you're one of several co-hosts. But you've spent this entire interview acting like you're the only person here who matters, talking over your colleagues and turning what should have been a conversation into a monologue of personal attacks. The other hosts looked mortified. Sarah Haynes was staring at her hands, while Alyssa Farenthold looked like she was trying to disappear. Even Whoopi seemed at a loss for how to handle the situation. Joy, however, was beyond shame at this point. I'm the only one here asking the hard questions that need to be asked. These other ladies want to treat you like some kind of celebrity royalty, but I'm not impressed by fame and fortune. Hard questions? Matt's voice was filled with genuine disbelief. Joy, you haven't asked a single hard question. You've made accusations. You've launched personal attacks, and you've tried to create controversy. But you haven't asked anything that would challenge viewers to think critically about environmental issues or inspire them to take action. Joy stood up abruptly, matching Matt's earlier gesture. You know what, Matt? I think our viewers can see exactly who you really are now. They can see past the carefully crafted public image to the entitled celebrity who can't handle being challenged. Matt stared at her for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice was calm but devastating. Joy, you're absolutely right about one thing. Your viewers can definitely see who someone really is today. They can see someone who invited a guest on their show under false pretenses, who chose personal destruction over productive dialogue, and who cares more about creating viral moments than actually informing people about important issues. He finished removing his microphone and set it carefully on the table. They can see someone who had an opportunity to discuss solutions to one of the most pressing challenges of our time, and chose instead to make it all about themselves. Joy's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water, apparently struggling to find a response that wouldn't make her look even worse than she already did. Matt turned to the other hosts with a respectful nod. Whoopi, Sarah, Alyssa, I apologize that you had to witness this. I have tremendous respect for what The View usually represents. And I'm sorry this happened on your show. He then looked directly into the camera one final time. To anyone watching who's interested in learning about practical steps they can take to address climate change, the documentary premieres next month on several streaming platforms. The information is out there for anyone who actually wants to have a constructive conversation about these issues. As Matt walked toward the exit, Joy couldn't resist one final desperate attempt to regain control of the narrative. That's right, Matt. Just walk away when someone finally holds you accountable. Matt stopped at the edge of the set and turned back one last time. Joy. Accountability would involve you taking responsibility for turning what should have been an educational opportunity into a personal attack session. Accountability would involve you explaining to your viewers why you chose controversy over content. But something tells me that kind of self-reflection isn't really your strong suit. With that, Matt Damon walked off the View set, leaving Joy Behar standing alone, visibly shaken, while the studio audience sat in stunned silence, and the other hosts looked like they wished they could follow him out the door. The cameras kept rolling for several more seconds, capturing Joy's obvious distress as she realized that her attempt to create a viral moment had backfired spectacularly, leaving her looking petty, unprofessional, and completely outclassed by the man she had tried to tear down. What did you think of this explosive confrontation? Was Joy Behar completely out of line? Or do you think celebrities should face this kind of aggressive questioning? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and make sure to subscribe for more behind-the-scenes moments that the mainstream media doesn't want you to see.